Steve Vondran here. We are talking today about the Flippa contract. This is the sale of a website contract. So after you have listed your domain name and somebody has come to buy it, as the seller, then you become obligated to sell it, and as the buyer, you become obligated to buy it. In case you don't know, just the basic contract law in the United States, and particularly in California and Arizona where I practice, is if you make an offer and the other person accepts and there's consideration on both sides, you're giving up your domain, they're giving you money, that's consideration. If you have that, then you have a valid and binding contract. So that's what happens when you sell your domain names on websites like Flippa. So that's going to create a contract. Now, after you do the contract on Flippa, you go to basically the closing area where you can start your escrow, and outside of their page, you'll see a sample website sale contract. Now, this is just a sample contract they put out there. You don't have to use it. But the buyer and seller could agree to go ahead and use this sample contract for the sale of your website. So I want to talk real quick about this contract before you just jump into that and sign it and say, yeah, let's get my 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 50,000, whatever you're getting for the domain. You should probably have a lawyer look at this contract and see if you want to use this. You may want to have a custom contract drafted for your sale. Now, if you're selling $50 domains, this may not be the most important thing to you. But when you're selling $10, $20, $50, $100,000 domain names, then you want to make sure, and not only domain names, but also the website, you want to make sure that it's all going to be legal, that you're not going to have problems that come back and haunt you, things that end up costing you more money than maybe what the domain was worth. So let's talk about a few things on their sample agreement. And the first thing you'll notice is their sample agreement informs you that, this is not legal advice, that you can have your own custom contract drafted. This is just something they're providing as a resource that maybe you'll use to help you out. But I want to point out a couple things that maybe you hadn't thought about in looking at this contract. And I recently sold a couple domains and had an occasion to go in and look at that, which is why I'm doing the video here. But anyway, so you have this contract which talks about a few things. Now, basically, one thing you're going to notice is it talks about when you're selling a website, what your assets are, the assets that you're agreeing to transfer to the buyer. And if you don't read it closely, you may miss a few things. But one of the things you're going to see is you're going to transfer all the files to your website. That's going to include your pictures, your videos, anything that's on your website basically is going to be included in the sale using this agreement. Okay, because it's pretty broad to make sure that all the buyer's going to get everything from your website basically when they buy it. So if you use the Flippa agreement, you're going to want to bear that in mind. But it talks about all your files, it talks about all your intellectual property rights. So if you have a domain name, for example, I'll give you the one that I sold, drunkdrivingattorney.com. If you have a brand on that, you could be transferring your brand, your logo, your copyrighted logo, your trademarked logo. You could be transferring all that. Just as long as you're aware of that, you may say, well, that's fine. Now, that's what I wanted to do. I sold the whole website, the whole business. But you may not have thought about that, and you may say, I was actually just trying to sell the internet address, the domain name. So something to bear in mind. The Flippa contract also states that you are selling the brand. Okay, and so the brand, that's kind of an all-encompassing term. If it's a donut shop, a donut domain, maybe you're selling the whole brand name. So you need to bear that in mind before you go ahead and execute that contract. You're also selling your rights to any third-party contracts that you have. So in other words, if somebody's paying you on your website to advertise and you have a contract with, for example, let's take drunkdrivingattorney.com. If I had a contract with a DUI expert who was paying me $200 a month to list his or her banner ad on my website, that's a third-party contract. I would be transferring that with the sale using the Flippa agreement. So just being aware of that. Also under the Flippa agreement, you are selling all the records. Records, what's that mean? You have to read the agreement and you'll see that it's pretty broad. Talks about your supplier lists, your customer lists, your contact lists. I mean, I don't know how many people really thought about when they're selling their website or their domain name that they're actually selling all these items. So that's why I say the Flippa contract is very broad, and in my estimation is protecting the buyer so that the buyer gets the transfer of everything when a website is sold. Okay, some other things that and that's why I say you may want to have a law firm like ours, internet law firm, help you draft a custom contract. You may have some unique things. You may say, well, I don't want to give this, I'll give that, but not this. I need a clause that protects me on that. Those are the kinds of things we can do. The Flippa contract will also talk about seller obligations to carry on the content of the website, not to disparage the goodwill of the website during this transfer process. One of the things that usually happens when you sell a domain is you have this escrow period where the buyer can inspect the domain. So there is an obligation under the Flippa contract to carry on the website so you don't just let it deteriorate like a piece of property. So those kinds of things, as I mentioned, you're selling under the Flippa contract, you're selling all your assets of the website, and this would include possibly if you wrote a free book and you had a free book on your website, somebody could potentially make the argument, hey, that book is mine. That's one of the intellectual property rights that belongs to the website. So I don't know how many people really think that through, but you could be giving up valuable intellectual property rights by transferring your domain and through the sale of a website. So I want you just to bear that in mind. This is why it's important to have this looked at. Also, there will be a clause talking about the seller indemnifying the buyer if some of the warranties that are set forth in the contract, some of the warranties like I have the right to sell, then you find out, wow, the guy has a partner or the domain belonged to a company and he didn't have the right to sell. So you're going to be indemnifying the buyer for the loss. Now the loss being, according to the Flippa contract, the cost of the domain. Now you may have a situation where you say, look, if I put in all this time and money into buying this domain and it turns out they don't have the power to sell it, I mean, that's going to waste a lot of my time. You may put in something like a liquidated damages clause or some other agreement to handle losses in the event some of those warranties aren't met. So that's important as well. Probably the final thing that I'm going to talk about, there's other clauses in here that probably need to be considered. We're running out of time though. But is choice of law. So under this Flippa domain and website sales agreement, if you are going to have a dispute, the choice of law provision, meaning where your suit's going to be filed, where your dispute's going to be heard, is in Victoria, Australia. Now, as much as I would love to go out to Victoria, Australia, I'm not sure I want to be submitting to disputes out there. Why? I don't know the law out there. Who knows what it is and who knows who you could get. So you may want to be provisioning for that, especially if you have like two companies in California or, company in California and Arizona. You may want something more regional as far as that's concerned. So at any rate, selling domains and websites can be fun business, but it is business and you need to take it serious. You need to take your contract serious. This is Attorney Steve Vondren. I'm a business and real estate lawyer, intellectual property, and we can help you customize a domain website sales agreement that meets your needs. So you can find out more about us. You can find us on internetlawyer.tv. That's internetlawyer.tv, or give us a call, 877-276-5084. We look forward to working with you. Thanks a lot.